Based upon you contacting operations who presumably contacted the street sweeping agency or company, did the street sweeper return to your knowledge?
Yes, he did.
And the individual, the street sweeper who returned, was he interviewed by homicide detectives, to your knowledge?
I believe he was.
Do you remember what that person's name was?
I do not.
Does Warren McMasters sound correct, if you know?
I can't, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
In addition to that, officer, did you did you become aware of what happened to the individual who was shot in the arm? In other words, was he taken to the hospital?
He was transferred to the hospital, yes.
What, if any, observations did you make of Boston Emergency Medical Services upon their arrival? Were you there before they were?
Yes, I was.
And what did they do once they arrived at the scene, as far as what you observed?
When they arrived, they obviously went over to the vehicle and pronounced the two individuals in the vehicle deceased. At that time, I was conducting other things on scene, so I really wasn't too focused on what the EMS were doing.
At some point, did you become aware of any news media or onlookers, civilians coming towards the scene?
Yes.
Being at the scene? What did you observe in that regard?
I saw a group of media across the street on the corner of Herald and Shawmut, and they started to gather there and trying to film the scene, which was ongoing at the time.
And the scene at that point, Sergeant, did the scene include the bodies of the two people who were now declared dead inside that car?
Yes.
From your view of where the news cameras were, was that within view of where the news cameras were, where those bodies were in the car?
Yes.
And did you ever at some point observe whether or not the bodies were attempted to be covered in any way?
Yes.
What did you observe in that regard?
Well, after the fact, when I had noticed that once EMS was there, that they had laid white sheets over the bodies in the car.
At some point, Sergeant, were you in constant contact over the Boston Police radio with other units as well as what's called operations?
Yes.
At some point, were you provided with information regarding a potential witness?
I was.
And with the information that was provided relative to the potential witness, did you receive a cellular telephone number for that witness?
Yes, I did.
Did you call that witness on the telephone, on your phone?
Yes.
Did you speak to that witness?
I did.
And again, without stating what any potential witness said, at some point were you aware of whether or not a description of a suspect shooting vehicle was broadcast in Boston Police broadcast channels at that point?
I'm sorry.
Did you become aware of a description of a suspect vehicle that was broadcast at that point?
Yes.
What was that?
It was a gray silver Pathfinder.
Is that an SUV?
Yes.
And did you have any information as to what type of plates were on that car?
Rhode Island plates.
And after speaking to the witness on the telephone, did you also confirm that description of the suspect vehicle?
Yes, I did.
Do you know whether or not that description not only went out to Boston police units, but did you ensure that that description went out to Massachusetts State Police as well?
Yes, I did.
And did you make any effort to ensure that Route 93 or any agencies that patrol Route 93 South was aware of that information?
Yes.
And what was your purpose in making sure Route 93 South was, or any agencies, police agencies patrolling that roadway were notified?
Because I know that that's the way back to Rhode Island.
Thank you, Sergeant. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sergeant McHale.
Good afternoon, Mr.
Sergeant, you're of course trained in what is required for you to write police reports.
Yes.
In fact, I guess as a sergeant, you have to sometimes sign off on other officers' police reports.
Yes, I do.
Make sure that they're including all the information that's relevant.
Yes.
Make sure they're including any information they might testify to.
Yes.
And making sure that they record and document every single thing that they do on scene?
Yes.
Okay. You issued one report in this case.
Yes.
Okay. And you were one of the two supervising sergeants at the crime scene.
Correct.
Okay. May I approach the witness?
Certainly.
Hey.
Do you identify that as your report, sir?
Yes, I do.
Can you take a moment to look at it before I ask you some further questions?
Yeah, thank you.
Looking for the laser pointer. Just a snake, it would have been me. Sergeant, is there anything in your report stating that you had blocked off these streets right over here?
No.
Now, you testified that that EMS showed up after you were there.
Yes.
You're in charge. EMS shows up, right?
Yes.
Are you aware of the regulations that are required to, once setting up a crime scene, that you are to restrict other officers, that you're actually to restrict who comes and goes out of the scene?
At my discretion, yes.
Yes. Including other police officers?
Yes.
Okay. And including, you're also there to, part of your role is to also instruct medical personnel how to enter the scene as to not disturb it.
Yes.
In fact, it's part of your regulations, is it not, sir?
Every crime scene is different. Well, yes.
Okay. I want to clarify that because you just kind of vacillated a little. If I show you the police regulations, would that assist you?
No, I'm familiar with them, sir.
Okay. So you're aware, sir, that your job is to instruct medical personnel as to how to enter the scene so as not to disturb the crime scene?
Yes.
And you just testified a moment ago to the jury that when they showed up, you kind of weren't paying too much attention to what they were doing.
It wasn't that I wasn't paying attention to what they were doing. There was just other things going on that I was doing at the time.
So,
Yes.
other things were directing your attention away from the actual crime scene, correct?
I was in the crime scene. There were other things within the crime scene that I was paying particular attention to. And had
At
to
the
do.
car, where it's most important, the bodies are there, it's yet to be disturbed. You were not there. You were further out away, is that what you're saying?
All right, the objection is sustained as to commentary. Put a question,
Sure.
if you would, please.
You said you had other things going on at the crime scene that directed your attention.
Yes.
And this was as medical personnel were entering the crime scene.
Yes.
Okay. They were not being supervised as they entered the crime scene.
They entered the crime scene. There were other officers there. I wasn't too far away. So, I mean, they didn't disturb. They went into the crime scene and they had to determine if they were viable or not, and they weren't viable. They were doing their job.
Understood. But subsequent to that, they then disrupted the crime scene when they placed sheets over the bodies.
Objection. I take it that is a question. You may answer that question if that's the way you viewed it.
I believe that they were trying to protect the integrity of the victims when the news reporters showed up. I don't think that, I know that they didn't intentionally mean to contaminate the crime scene, if that's what you're trying to say.
I'm not trying to say anything, sir. I am saying something.
Okay.
I'm saying specifically that these EMT, by your own testimony, entered that scene unsupervised.
they didn't enter the scene unsupervised.
So it wasn't you that supervised them? Did you direct someone else
Do.
and I want to say this specifically, did you instruct someone else to instruct them as to how to enter the scene, as to not disturb the crime scene as little as possible?
I think they've been trained, and the EMS have been to many crime scenes, and I believe that they are more than capable of going into a crime scene and not disturbing a crime scene.
I don't want to misquote your testimony. So it's your testimony, sir, that they don't require supervision. You're just relying on their training.
Do I believe they need supervision? If I thought that they needed to take a direct route into the crime scene at that point, I would have made sure that they did.
Sir, listen to my question, please. My question specifically is it your testimony that they did not require supervision to enter the crime scene, that you were relying on their training to enter the crime scene? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
At that point, like I said, when the EMS arrived, I was dealing with other stuff. So no, I didn't supervise them coming into the scene, no.
And you didn't instruct any other officers who were under your supervision to do so either?
I'm sure an officer they pulled up, so they were feet away from where the motor vehicle was parked. So there were officers there. And no, I don't believe that any of the officers directed them to, in an area, how to come into the crime scene, no.
And also supervise them to ensure that they did not disturb it either? Is that a yes? I see
Yes,
not.
yes.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that the media, once EMS placed the sheets over the body, this was okay because the media showed up?
I think their intentions were good.
Okay. Now, you had just testified that you blocked off these streets over here as to prevent entrance to the crime scene, correct?
Yes.
You could have also sent the perimeter back so that the media could not film the bodies, correct?
Yes, at that point.
You could have, but you didn't.
I didn't have enough personnel at that time, and the media got there very, very quick. Yes.
You have a badge,
Yep,
okay? You have the power of law enforcement behind you.
correct.
If you instruct a media truck to get back, that they're in an area that's a crime scene, they have to comply with your orders, do they not, sir?
Yes.
Okay. So you don't need backup, right?
There was a lot going on at the scene.
My question to you, sir, is you don't need backup to tell the media to get back.
No.
If I can have just a moment, Judge. Sergeant, when you arrived, you were the third person to arrive?
Yes.
Okay, and by then you were informed that a street sweeper had come by.
No, not at that point.
You were advised later on that a street sweeper had come by?
Yes.
Okay, and then you actually made a call to get the street sweeper to come back?
Yes.
Okay, and the street sweeper came by before you arrived, because you didn't see it, right?
Correct.
Or was there too much going on that you didn't see a street sweeper go by?
No. I did not see the street sweeper. It went by before I got there.
You were there moments after the shooting.
Yes.
So within those moments, a street sweeper went by, and not while you were there supervising the scene.
No.
I have no further questions. Thank you. Oh, actually I do. I'm sorry. You testified under direct that your best characterization of the lighting in that area was pretty dark.
Yes.
No further questions.
Anything further? Just a couple of questions. You want to try? Sergeant, just calling your attention to a couple of questions Mr. Baez asked you on cross-examination. When the EMS arrived at the scene, at least in your mind, again, your opinion, as Mr. Baez asked your opinion on such things, was it more important for EMS to try to tend to the victims to potentially save them, or to preserve evidence? Which was your priority?
Tend to the victims.
And was that the overall #1 priority over anything else that was on your mind at that point?
Yes.
Object to the characterization of that first question. That was not my question.
No, overruled, that may stand.
The priority is to save the victims?
Yes.
And you were asked some questions and you indicated that your attention was drawn to other things. Can you just describe what you meant by that? What was going on? What was the scene like? Was it calm, chaotic? What was it like?
It was chaotic. We were trying to round up the witnesses that were there, trying to separate them. Also, that's when I was informed by Officer O'Donnell that the street sweeper he had observed the street sweeper turn onto Herald Street prior to his arrival, or on his arrival, that it was going down the street, that it might have collected evidence relative to the scene.
So just to clarify that, Mr. Baez asked you about it. The street sweeper did not go by while you were at the scene.
No.
And you've indicated that, according to Officer O'Donnell, upon his arrival, he saw the street sweeper leaving the area of the scene.
Yes.
And you immediately took action on that, correct?
Yes, I did.
Now, when you say the scene was chaotic, you were rounding up witnesses, you got the information from Officer O'Donnell. What else, if anything, was going on?
And at that point, the media started to show up, and we were just trying to figure out the areas that needed to be secured, and
Did you also become aware that there could be potential other victims at some point?
yes,
And was that something that was also going on while this was all happening?
yes,
Did you direct your officers to search for other potential victims on the D4 side of that bridge?
yes, I did.
And Mr. Baez asked you a number of questions about whether or not you could have or should have ordered the press out of the area. At least in your mind, was it more of a priority to look for potential victims or get the press out of there?
Objection, Judge Lee.
Sustained.
What was your priority with all of the various things you've just described for the jury that was going on after EMS had pronounced the victims?
Objection, Judge.
Overruled.
My main concern was that there weren't any other victims in the area, and that if there were, that we needed to find them so they could receive medical attention.
Thank you, sir. No further questions.
Sergeant, the people that you were looking for were people in the BMW that had fled, right?
Yes,
Okay. So, did you see at any time a black male approximately 6 feet to 6 feet 2 inches tall of Cape Verdean descent standing around the crime scene covered in blood?
no, I did not.
Now, may I pursue this, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I'm directing your attention to responsibilities of the first responding officers at the crime scene.
Objection, Your Honor, beyond scope.
This directly relates to his questions.
Let's see where it goes.
Now, I'd like for you, I'm pointing you out to specifically this section where it discusses medical personnel. Can you read that sentence right
It
there?
says, instruct medical personnel how to enter the crime scene so as not to disturb the crime scene as little as possible.
Okay. What else should the officer do?
Should observe the medical personnel and note what objects they move and or touch.
Why?
Objection to the reading of the policy.
Sustained.
Now, sir, you understand these regulations to mean obviously medical personnel have to enter a scene, right?
Sustained. I believe this is beyond the redirect, counsel.
Actually relates to, counsel raised an issue of priority as to the medical personnel. I'm following up on that specific area.
If you want to ask that question, feel free.
Yes, sir. Now, the regulation takes into consideration that sometimes emergency personnel have to enter a scene,
Yes.
right? Okay. And that was the case here.
Yes.
Okay. But the regulations tell you that you are to send someone with that officer so that they can document what the EMS personnel move and know exactly what was done as to preserve the scene, correct?
Overruled. If that's your understanding of the regulations, you may answer that.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The regulations then instruct you that you should observe the medical personnel and note what objects they move or touch.
Correct.
Okay, and this is so you know what was moved and how the integrity of the scene was compromised.
Sure. Yes.
Okay, so after medical personnel is there, they've done their job. Did you observe them and see and note what objects they moved or touched?
No, I personally didn't.
Did you supervise anyone or instruct anyone to note what objects they moved or touched?
No, I did not.
I have no further questions.
All right, thank you, sir. You may sit down, please.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Someone calls David Chaffee.
Right this way, sir. So you're gonna start right there, you're gonna raise your right hand, you're gonna face the clerk.
You solemnly swear the testimony you should give this court and jury in the issue now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant at the bar shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you, sir. Time to follow the officer to the stand.
Right this way, sir.
May I inquire?
Please.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Would you please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury and spell your last name for the record?
My name is David Chaffee, spelled Cioffi.
What is your current occupation, sir?
I'm a paramedic for the city of Boston.
How long have you been a paramedic with the city of Boston?
It's going on since 2005, so 11 years now.
Prior to being a paramedic with the city of Boston, did you have some other role within the Boston Emergency Medical Services?
That's correct.
What was that, sir?
I was employed as an EMT.
How many years were you employed as an EMT?
It was a total of 7 years.
So all total, how long have you been employed as either an EMT or a paramedic?
It's 20 years.
Was that all with the City of Boston Emergency Medical Services?
I also worked in the private sector prior to employment at Boston EMS, and that was also for 4 years.
Would you describe your educational background, sir?
Sure. I graduated from high school. Shortly after that, I went to a certificate program and became an EMT.
What's required to get a certificate to become an EMT?
An EMT is a certificate that takes about 6 months of schooling, and you're trained in basic life support, CPR, that type of thing. I then went to work after that.
And you eventually went to Boston Emergency Medical Services as an EMT?
I then went to Northeastern University and took a 2-year program and became a certified paramedic.
That was a 2-year program.
Correct.
And what was required to become a certified paramedic? In other words, were there any exams that you had to take or any type of testing?
That's correct.
What was that, sir?
We had a year of schooling, learning with the tests that go with it, anatomy and physiology. Then we had to do a internship in the hospitals, in the OR, in the ER, on cardiac floors, that type of thing.
And to be both a paramedic and ultimately even before that an EMT for the city of Boston, do you have to pass any types of proficiency testing?
That's correct. When you're employed at Boston EMS, you come in with the certification, either EMT or paramedic. You take the exam, the entry exam, and you start as an EMT, and that's our entry-level process.
To become a paramedic, sir, do you have to take an exam to become a paramedic?
That's correct. So if we're being promoted up, we have to go through a written and a practical examination, and then I believe it's 6 to 8 weeks of training that you ride on the streets with the instructors and the doctors.
And as an EMT or paramedic for the City of Boston Emergency Medical Services, are there continuing education that goes on and continuing training that you're required to do?
That's correct.
Now, if you would, sir, can you describe for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what's the difference between a paramedic and an EMT? And an EMT, just for the record, does that stand for Emergency Medical Technician?
That's correct.
What are the differences between the two, and what, if any, abilities does a paramedic have to perform care that an EMT does not?
EMTs are the basic level. There's two types of ambulance that we run in the city of Boston. It's a EMT or a BLS truck, which is basic life support. Their responsibilities are first aid, CPR. They use automatic defibrillators, and they can give some basic medications like an EpiPen. The paramedics truck that we run in the city of Boston is called an ALS truck, and it stands for Advanced Life Support. We can provide medications. We can do small procedures. Pretty much anything an emergency room can do, we can do that in your home or in the street.
Call your attention now, sir, as a paramedic in the City of Boston, what is your ability or roles or authority relative to pronouncing victims at either crime scenes or at any scene for that matter?
We're not physicians, so we're paramedics, and we don't have the ability to pronounce someone dead. We have the ability to determine if they're viable or not viable.
What are the factors that go into determining whether or not a patient is viable or not viable?
There's a set criteria made by the state, which we work off of the statewide treatment protocols, and we also have department protocols that are set forth between our medical control doctors.
Now, sir, with your 20-plus years of experience as Boston Emergency Medical Services, can you estimate approximately how many scenes you've responded to for penetrating trauma? And what I mean by that is gunshots or stabbings.
There's been quite a few. I don't have an exact number, but it's hundreds.
Hundreds?
Hundreds.
So I'm calling your attention now to a particular date and your response to a particular scene, that being Monday morning, July 16th, the year 2012, at approximately 2:33 a.m., were you dispatched to go to a certain scene?
That's correct.
Where were you dispatched to go to?
We were dispatched to Shawmut Ave at the intersection, the street between Marginal and Herald Streets.
When you received that dispatch to go to that scene, do you remember about where you were, how far away?
We were just leaving the Boston Medical Center. We were finishing up a transport of a patient, and then we responded to that scene.
And does, as EMTs, paramedics for Boston Emergency Medical Services, do you keep track of the exact time that a dispatch is made, the exact time of arrival, the time treating a patient, those types of things?
That's correct. We do our very best to do that directly in the ambulance, but there's also a CAD system, the computer that keeps record of all these times.
And do you know approximately how long it took you to get to the scene when you were called when you dispatched at 2:33 a.m.?
I believe we were there rather quickly. We were only about 8 blocks away, so I think it was only a few minutes.
When you arrived at the scene, sir, were Boston police officers already there?
That's correct.
Was crime scene tape up yet? Yet or was it not yet?
No.
I'm just placing on the screen, sir, what's been entered as exhibit number 11. Do you recognize the car that's depicted in that, sir?
I do.
And is that the car that was at the intersection of Herald Street and Shawmut Avenue upon your arrival shortly after 2:33 a.m. on the 16th of July, 2012?
That's correct.
When you arrived at the scene, what did you do strike that, who was your partner at the time?
Sean Murphy.
What did the two of you do upon your arrival at the scene?
There's two of us that work in the ambulance together. Sean was the driver that night, and I was the attending with him. When we arrived from the south of the scene, so we came in from the south. We mirrored the vehicle in terms of nose to nose of the vehicle. I got out of the passenger side of the vehicle, of the ambulance, and walked to the driver's side, and Sean got out from the driver's side and walked up to the passenger side of the vehicle.
If I could stop you there for a second, sir. I just placed Exhibit 7 on the screen. Is that the angle that you said you pulled the ambulance up to, directly in front of the vehicle?
That's correct.
And is that the direction you were coming from the south, which, looking at the diagram to your left, Exhibit 4, would be below the red dot? It would be coming up from the area of Pine Street Inn, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you indicate that you, upon arriving at the scene, what you see on Exhibit 7, you went to the driver's side, your partner went to the passenger side, is that correct?
That's correct.
Please describe for ladies and gentlemen of the jury what you saw when you got to the driver's side.
When on my approach to the vehicle, my supervisor, who is the deputy, he's basically the boss of the shift, he was standing there. The driver's side door was open, and anytime we approach any type of scene, our safety is most concerned, and usually any vehicle that we approach, we try to do so safely. And we typically look to see if the vehicle is in drive, if it's in park, so that no one gets hurt. And I talked to the supervisor. I said, "Is it safe?" And he said, "Yeah."
Did you become aware that the car had been in drive but had been placed in park and the keys removed?
That's correct.
And who was that done by?
Deputy Bossy. He then said, "I put the car in park, removed the keys and put it on the dashboard." And then I asked him if he could just slide out of the way so we could start our exam.
And didn't he in fact get out of the way to allow you to start your exam?
That's correct.
Before you started your exam, I should probably preface this with the first question, were you focused on getting into the car and tending to victims at this point, or were you aware of what was going on around you?
When we approach any scene, our major concern is, are we going to become a victim first? So we do take a quick scan of the scene, make sure it's safe, and then once that's done rather quickly, our main concern is the patient.
What was going on at the scene as you arrived? You indicated Deputy Bossy was there, police officers were there. Did you see other people or things?
The only thing I can recall, there was, I believe, 3 or 4 policemen that were there prior to our arrival.
Now, when you finally were able to direct your attention to the person in the driver's seat, please describe what you observed.
When I got to him, we could obviously see that he was non-viable. He had no signs of life, and he had penetrating trauma to the chest.
And when you say signs of life, it may sound obvious, but as a trained professional, what did you look for signs of life on this victim?
First thing to do is to see if he's breathing, and at the same time, we also check for pulses and make sure that there's a presence of a pulse. Once we determined that he was not breathing and there was no pulse, I do an exam and I check the pupils, and his pupils had no response.
Did you see any signs of life whatsoever on the driver of that car?
No.
And at that point, sir, did you also make any observations of what you described as penetrating trauma to the chest? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was that consistent with anything you'd seen in the past experience?
That is correct.
What was it consistent with?
Non-violent.
But did it appear to be a gunshot wound or stabbing?
It appeared to be a gunshot wound.
Did you notice anything else about the person that you would indicate was non-viable? Anything about his skin or his clothing?
The clothing was intact. There was nothing removed. And he was, prior to our arrival, he had some diaphoresis of the skin, which is sweating.
What's it called?
Diaphoresis.
And the court reporter may need you to spell that, sir, if you don't mind.
Oh, that.
If you can.
Okay, she's got it.
And that means sweating?
Correct.
Was it a lot excessive sweating or just ordinary sweating?
The reason why we use that word instead of just saying simply sweating is because sweating is something you do with activity. When you're diaphoretic, that means that's your body's response to something that's going on.
And is there any significance to that from the medical perspective?
Sympathetic nervous system was kicking in progress, and person was dying.
Did you pronounce the driver, or did you declare the driver to be non-viable?
That's correct.
And what happened next, sir?
My partner communicated to me that he had similar findings in the passenger side. We then backed away from the scene. We backed away from the vehicle.
Why were you backing away from the vehicle at that point?
During our training in the academy, we're taught that if there's nothing further we can do to limit the destruction, I guess, of the crime scene so that we don't contaminate it. So once we determined there was nothing for us to do, we stepped back away from it.
May I approach you witness, Your Honor?
We may.
May I reapproach that one?